That's funny.
This is gonna be hard. No music. Let's not pretend like this show wasn't a big reason why Nickelodeon was, and still kind of is, the punching bag of the 3 animation television networks in the United States at least. To those who may not know of Breadwinners, let me give a little context. Breadwinners was picked up off the internet Annoying Orange style, and given a season or 2. The pilot was made within 2 months in an effort to entertain fellow colleagues at a film festival. From then on, it developed into a series on Nickelodeon during a time where SpongeBob was in the middle of its longest season. Sanjay and Craig, Tough Puppy, Fanboy and Chum Chum, and Robot and Monster weren't really building any steam to stay for the long haul, and Nickelodeon wasn't really having any show stick. Breadwinners is the pinnacle of that time period, so what would be the worst episode in that case? Well, unlike Teen Titans Go, the worst episode of Breadwinners isn't an episode that is offensive and drastically different in terms of quality. In fact, it's the complete opposite. The worst episode of Breadwinners is the most bland episode, with the collective characteristics that make it the most Breadwinners-y-esque episode. You know how for SpongeBob, that would be Band Geeks, where the best of SpongeBob is all in one episode? If I could find one episode that has everything that Breadwinners stood for, that will be the worst episode. And that episode is Graining Day.
Graining Day. The one day each month that breadwinners set aside to brush up on their skills.
One thing that generally annoys me is when something has potential and it clearly could have been something great, but flat out ignores it for a cheaper route, or due to flat out not caring enough for the finished product. I want to say first and foremost, Breadwinners could have been a good show. Dare I say, a great show. In binging the show, due to Invader Zim being dirtied with a Breadwinners promo at the end, I actually found the best episode Breadwinners can salvage out of like 3 good episodes, and multiple episodes that were bad. As you can see, I'm not as angry as I was with the last worst episode because this isn't a feeling of anger, it's disappointment. So as you guys would agree that Breadwinners was a flaw in concept, how was it a flaw in execution as well?
Lesson 1. Always be on the lookout. Look out! Lesson 2. Never do this. And finally, lesson 3. Always trust your gut. Okay, gut, what do we do?
Run, man!
Sway Sway is like the worst friend ever in this episode. Upon rewatch, he does nothing, up and 2, leaving Badooz to fend for himself in disguise of a test that honestly wasn't even really implemented that well. Why does this matter? Because you know, and I know, Nickelodeon was high off of the 2 bro characters. And what better way to mess that up than to have no reason to show why they're friends? That's this episode. Isn't it the simplest thing ever to write a show about 2 friends taking on the world? It doesn't have to be deep. Take a look at SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob at his core wants to make people happy. And I'm a fan of simple when it comes to animation. And also simple doesn't have to be easy. I consider Ed, Edd and Eddy to be a simple show, but you couldn't make another Ed, Edd and Eddy that easily. Breadwinners suffers from the desire to be like other shows without understanding how they work. It doesn't have a core, something that you can connect with. The goal of Sway Sway and Badooz is to be the best breadwinners. But why would you care? I kept coming away from each episode thinking, it's not that bad, but I wouldn't watch this if I weren't reviewing it before. Even this episode here. I wouldn't put it with your average bad Teen Titans Go or SpongeBob episodes. It isn't offensive, and if you watch this episode, you probably wouldn't really find that much super wrong first.
I like you boys. Nice to meet you. What are your names? Now wait, don't tell me. Johnny Boy and Stinky.
Those names are better. Sway Sway and Badooz hurt the type and to say. It feels like the show was heavily market researched. I never had a good time watching the show because everything was placed to make it feel like a kid's show, but not have any of those impalpables that make you truly connect with a good animated show that anyone can enjoy. Well, if we never start, we'll never finish, so let's continue. The premise of this episode is that it is Graining Day, so Sway Sway is teaching Badooz how to survive monsters. Except he doesn't, so even the premise is flat out wrong. Sway Sway does the whole I'm playing ignorant to test you card to his best friend Badooz, so unless you want to stretch the definition of teaching, he's really not. I honestly think with the different breads, the different aspects of the job, being a breadwinner, the crazy town they're in, all of this is great seeds for what could have been a great show. Look at Mighty Magiswords, look at Pokemon. This show in concept could have been very similar to those type of shows. The issue is that they don't want to take any of these routes, and they double down on the effort of not taking any of these routes and doing essentially this. And I've watched a ton of episodes, and while the bread aspect is there, it isn't fleshed out. Rather, it's used as a template for the template episodes they have. It also doesn't help that they reuse a lot of walk cycles. And I know what you're gonna say. It's a reference to retro video games that have those limited walk cycles. Two things. One, many video games did this out of necessity, not choice. Also, many retro games that we enjoy are good because they are a good game at its core, despite its limitations, through concept, execution, and sometimes story. Two, again, it's very convenient that Breadwinners limits its animation, limits how good their backgrounds are, use Photoshop ducks with a sound effect for their background, sometimes for even reoccurring characters like Jenny Quackles, reuse a lot of assets, reuse a lot of tried and true episode formats, and limits their understanding of pop media. They romanticize this animation style, which looks cheap. I'm sure a lot of work goes into the show, more than I'd ever understand, but the end product doesn't look on par with other shows. It looks considerably less than other shows. And I want to get this off my chest now. YouTube animators may have limited animation styles, but that is because many times they're a one-person channel or small team, and don't want to take years to do what would take a much bigger team less. So I'm not sure why Breadwinners is trying to replicate a style that honestly goes against the idea of getting higher in the industry. What is the point of making a cartoon with Nickelodeon, getting the staff, if you're essentially just gonna have the same quality as if you did it yourself? I'm sure if the top animators on YouTube were to get picked up by these companies, they'd want their ideas to be better animated. Not the same thing that they were doing before, right? It would make you ask, which is a good question before I even say what you were gonna ask, what is something that Breadwinners is putting their effort into? Well, to be fair, the sound direction. A lot of Breadwinners episodes are built off of the sound composition.
What's our lesson this month? How to wear a helmet? Yeah. How to swing an axe? Yeah. How to just sort of hang out and look cool?
Now, yes, this is pretty cool, and I think it's a pretty cool aspect of the show. But Breadwinners isn't a music video. It's a cartoon, and cartoons should be, at the very least, entertaining, if not anything else.
If you really are a breadwinner, then what's our motto? Banana sticks. No! No, but Dooby-Doo! Wait, this guy is shifty. You told me to trust my gut, and my gut is saying the same thing.
Yeah, he's shifty.
Unless what Sway Sway is trying to do is to get Badooz to go against Sway Sway and take down the monster, there is literally no chance of anything but Badooz trying to inform Sway Sway and he turning him down. It's more irritating to watch this for 6 more minutes. It'd be one thing if the comedy was good, but I often find myself watching the show and thinking, there's so many better options out there that don't get to the border of insulting their audience, and I don't use that often, if ever. This may be my first time using that, because I know a lot of people tend to use that at gross out, which is stupid. Just because gross out humor isn't something you like doesn't mean that it's automatically insulting the audience. Gross out humor, like cringe comedy, can be used well. It's just that a lot of people use it in a lowest common denominator way, to be low effort and to grab the lowest hanging fruit, which, by the way, Breadwinners does as often as I breathe. So you're probably thinking, okay Jay, I get the story, Badooz is trying to get Sway Sway away from this shifty guy. Does he try a lot of times too?
Let's make a break for it. We can be back home by nightfall.
Or we could stay here and spend the night in the Brand Canyon camping with Rusty.
So Badooz decides to follow him after seeing the revelation of him having multiple eyes. And surprise, surprise.
There we go.
Oh, let's see. Foster's Home from Make 'em Up Pals from Foster's Home, Parasites from Teen Titans Go, A Breath of Fresh Squidward from SpongeBob, The Big Fairy Share Scare from Fairly Odd Parents, Lights Camera Danger from Jimmy Neutron, The Robot from The Amazing World of Gumball. I can go on. And I can only name like 1.5 episodes, even from the list I just said, that actually do this concept correct, because the idea of your main character being annoyed at the obvious, that's pretty hard to make funny. I'm not saying it's impossible, because you would have to understand why that could or would be funny, and many episodes that try that don't. So you remember how earlier I said that Sway Sway does nothing up and to blowing off Badooz to fend for himself and also Sway Sway? Well,
I knew he was a monster all along. Okay. Good night.
Good night. You can't go to sleep. Rusty's gonna eat you alive.
then I guess you'd better save me.
But
Consider it your final test.
Which would be okay if the episode had a better indication of training or a test going on, but the whole point of being tested and this whole idea only comes at this point. My proof of this is despite the beginning of the episode dedicating a whole 10 seconds to graining day, nothing happens beyond that. And it makes the episode nothing that makes it special at least. Breadwinners does a very similar episode across the board, which for episodic shows that are comedy based, that's not the worst thing in the world. Classic Fairly Odd Parents didn't vary too much when it came to concept, but the execution was solid and they cared about animating well enough to present their ideas with effort, and most importantly, each episode's theme was taken for the most part seriously. So Badooz has a really lackluster fight that doesn't really do too much except hilariously repeat itself in concept to pad out the time. Of course he saves the day. I don't think that was ever at stake here. So does he pass the test? I guess it's implied because Sway Sway is asleep. What does he gain? Who cares? It's for kids, right? Well, the episode ends with my life being wasted for 11 minutes, and that was graining day. Breadwinners represents the times when networks cash in based off of a surface level understanding of their audience. This show was quickly cut off because why would it have succeeded? And honestly, this is not only the most Breadwinners-esque episode that you'd ever get, but it's one of those rare episodes where I don't understand why they're friends. Breadwinners is one of the few shows that I would not want people to build off of this formula. I feel like this is malicious towards the industry as far as innovating and growing forward. But anyway, what do you guys think? What show should I cover next for the worst episode? Maybe you have a few episodes that you'd like me to take a look at. Follow me on these social networks and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care. Alpha out.